Ah, Pixar, one of the most influential animation studios of our generation, known for having created dozens of masterpieces over the past few decades. While the studio has taken a dip in quality over the years, its best works still stand the test of time, having brought light and wonder into the lives of countless people. But one film the studio produced in their heyday, that being the late 90s and early to mid-2000s, that has often gone underappreciated is Cars. Cars is considered by many to be the black sheep of the studio. Many say that it was only created for merchandise with a story that has confusing logic and a world that makes no sense. What these people fail to realize is that there's so much more to this movie than meets the eye. And I'm here to prove what a brilliant film it actually is. The idea for Cars originated around 1998, the year that Pixar had just completed A Bug's Life. The original pitch for the film was entitled The Yellow Car. It told the story of a custom-built electric car trying to find acceptance and approval in a world filled with gas guzzlers. When asked about what the inspiration for his story was, former Pixar animator Jørgen Klubian had this to say: "In Denmark, there has never been car production because the country is too small. Yet in the 1980s, some enthusiastic folks got the idea of making a three-wheeled one-person car that ran on electricity. They put it into production and it worked great in the city, but out on the highway it was too slow. People also thought that this car was ugly. I thought that the electric car was ahead of its time, and it struck me odd that my fellow Danes didn't agree. What happened with this car reminded me of The Ugly Duckling by Hans Christian Andersen. This famous Danish character wasn't accepted at first, but in the end, it proved to be right on the money." Ultimately, Klubian's original pitch proved too slim to wrap an entire film around, and Pixar decided to shelf the idea in favor of Toy Story 2. However, then Chief Executive Officer of Pixar, John Lasseter, liked several things about it. For one, the idea of a world filled with living automobiles. 2, the characters of Sergeant Fillmore. And 3, the small-town setting. The idea would soon be picked up again after a life-changing experience Lasseter had. In the year 1999, Pixar was doing extremely well for itself. Toy Story, A Bug's Life, and Toy Story 2, all directed by Lasseter, were smash hits, performing exceedingly well both critically and financially. John's wife Nancy saw how much this meant to her husband. He had worked so hard and come so far in his career, and the results clearly paid off. But she also warned him to be careful in the way that he celebrated that success.
My wife said, "John, we've supported you in making all these films and the building of Pixar and all like that. But you better be careful. Because one day you're going to wake up and your boys are going off to college and you will have missed it."
The message rang loud and clear in John's head. So that summer, he decided to take his family on a road trip across America. Their goal was to drive all the way to the Pacific Ocean while staying off the interstate as much as possible.
We got so close as a family. It changed my life.
From that experience, Lasseter finally knew what had to be done to bring that story to life. The yellow car had to go. The story needed a new protagonist, someone who was flawed, but still strong enough to carry a story on his own. Enter Lightning McQueen. Having taken the film's directorial responsibilities upon himself, Lasseter quickly set to work. To best symbolize the distinction between life in the fast lane and slowing down, the filmmakers decided to incorporate the two worlds of the automobile that they loved so much: racing and Route 66. To ensure that they would be portrayed as accurately as possible, Pixar reached out to many people involved in those fields. Key among them being Michael Wallace, Darryl Waltrip, Richard Petty, Humpy Wheeler, and Artie Kepner, among many others. On the research trips that the studio took down Old 66 and to the nation's racetracks, they learned a great many things. They truly came to understand how devastating it was for those who lived along Route 66 when the interstate came along and bypassed them.
When we went out on Route 66, I noticed that every town, every establishment, every building, you stood there and looked at it, and without asking one question or getting one answer, they were telling stories. cracks in the road where grass was growing, the aged paint, a brick wall that had 3 different signs painted onto the paint's peeled off and you could see all 3. All of these things told you that these establishments, this town, this place was once vibrant, was once full of life, but that's been a long time ago.
I've been looking forward to seeing this place.
Yeah, pressed metal ceiling.
Oh, look at this.
Pressed metal ceiling.
One visit the company made to Galena, Kansas, a small town along Route 66, led to an unexpected discovery by Cars' late co-director, Joe Ranft.
And we turned this corner in Galena, Kansas, and there in this old abandoned gas station were these rusty trucks and cars, and one of them was this tow truck. And I caught Joe looking at this tow truck, and there was something about it that just touched Joe, that really, really touched him. And he started drawing.
And at the time, we had this truck character, and his name was Zeb, and he was just supposed to be kind of a hillbilly truck in town. And Joe was doing the voice for the scratch.
You know, one time there was this pickup named Betty who lived next door. I used to crash into her just to make her angry. But then I started wondering if maybe I crashed into her just so as I could talk with her.
That pureness and that earnest of heart he has is Joe.
The sort of non sequitur, weird, bizarre, sometimes creepy humor that was very Joe.
He won 3 piston cups.
He did what in his cup?
This feeling that Joe put into it kind of became Zeb, what was Zeb, and then became Mater.
The filmmakers also went to painstaking lengths to make sure that every detail in the film would be accurate. Not only did they want to ensure that the way the races would be broadcast to the audience would feel authentic.
Hey, camera 1 is right at the start-finish line, so he sweeps all the way through, and usually I use camera 1 all the way through if I'm doing the pointers.
But that each and every car in the movie would look and act exactly how they would in real life.
The first tests we did looked wrong. You know, they looked like cartoons. The weight wouldn't be right. The physics wouldn't be exactly right. They would look kind of light.
Minor details like paint, lug nuts, and tire treads were taken into great consideration to ensure maximum authenticity.
Doc's color's not accurate. We should get there is a 1951 stock color that's a darker blue.
Pixar even used ray tracing to create accurate shading, lighting, and reflections on their characters. They studied the subcultures of the automobile very closely in order to be as inclusive as possible. When designing the tuner gang, they went all out, making the spoilers and exhaust pipes as large as possible to match the trends of the time. They even went back and made them bigger after seeing how extreme the tuning culture had gotten. The whole film is littered with clever car references and side puns. For example, at her diner, Flo serves a brand of gasoline called Texas Tea. The reason it's called Texas Tea is because Texas tea is slang for crude oil. Even the flora and fauna of the movie are deliberately designed to look car-like. Taillight patterns are embedded into the flowers, and there's rock formations of hood ornaments and radiators. All these clever details immerse you in the world and make it feel believable. However, Lasseter didn't just want to make a film that only car buffs could enjoy. He wanted to make a movie that everyone could relate to and enjoy, which he does through its story. Rebellious characters are often not the most well-liked. Many people find them to be arrogant, snarky, and in some cases downright unlikable. What they often fail to realize is that if they looked deeper, they'd find a beautiful person inside that just needs some love and support and is dealing with their pain in the best way they know how. This is exactly the case with McQueen. The reason he is such a brilliant character is that despite being a machine, he embodies something so human. As a stock car, McQueen was designed to do one thing and one thing only: go fast. Stock cars aren't meant to be daily drivers. They're not the sort of vehicle you can pop over to the supermarket in and buy a pint of milk. They're high-performance racing machines built for speed and winning championships. To have a character like that be forced to do the exact opposite of what he was built for is a clever subversion. But more importantly, it gets the message across that the journey in life is the reward very effectively. What better way to symbolize that idea than have it be centered around vessels of transportation? Mater is one of the best written comedic characters I have ever seen in my whole life. And that's saying a lot, because comic reliefs often don't fall in my good graces. At times they can be far too aloof and unintelligent, making them more irritating than entertaining. In some of the worst cases that I've seen, they can even completely diminish the seriousness and integrity of a story. But that's never been the case with Mater. While some may argue that he is an annoying and unlikable character, mainly due to Cars 2, I wholeheartedly disagree. While he might not be firing on all cylinders, what makes him such a genius character is the fact that his simple outlook on life allows him to see things as they really are.
Mater's not the smartest guy in the world, but Mater's got great common sense.
He's a silly, goofy guy that you don't seem to take too seriously, but every once in a while he would be the character that would say something that actually is kind of deep.
He doesn't care what he's like on the outside. It's what's on the inside that makes him so rich.
McQueen couldn't see that the answers to what he really needed were right in front of his face because he overcomplicated everything. But Mater could see clearly through the fog. This also connects directly back to the idea of him being a tow truck, because by nature, tow trucks are meant to help. That is why his role in the story is so important, and why he's so much more than just a simple comic relief. He helped McQueen by giving him something he didn't know he needed in his life: friendship. The look on McQueen's face when Mater tells him that he accepts him as his friend says so much in such a subtle way. He may not realize it, nor be willing to admit it, but it's clear he's begun to change. Mater accomplished something that few comic reliefs ever do, making both the protagonist and the audience stop and think. Cars is just as much about Doc Hudson as it is about Lightning McQueen. While he is much older than Lightning and serves a more mentoring role in the plot, the two are more similar than meets the eye. Like McQueen, Doc has suffered through something incredibly difficult and now wants to defend himself from ever being hurt again by developing a front to hide behind. The only difference between them is that McQueen is able to realize that he doesn't have to hide behind those walls much sooner than Doc does, which is why the old racer ends up making a huge mistake. In his bitterness, he wasn't able to see the life that McQueen had managed to breathe back into Radiator Springs, viewing the young rookie only as a symbol of pain and misery. In sending him away, he takes the joy the townsfolk never thought they'd find again away once more. And when they all go back inside, having become disheartened at the prospect of serving someone ever again, he is left sitting below a flashing traffic light, alone, in the dark, finally realizing the true impact of his decision. He realizes that the only way to make this right is to face his past by coaching McQueen during his big race. And by doing so, not only is Doc able to give McQueen the wisdom and support he needed in his life, but through his experience of coaching the young rookie, he's able to grow and mature as well. Likewise, Sally Carrera plays an equally important role. Like Mater, she is far more than merely a trope character, as some claim. Her actions in the story are integral to the plot and help transform McQueen as a person. Like him, she's lived a very fast-paced life, but she's come to understand what a shallow life it really is. Deep down, Lightning knows, but refuses to admit it. It isn't until he pursues a relationship with the beautiful Portia that he comes to truly understand that. And in return for giving him the love that he needed in his life, he returns the favor to her tenfold by helping the town get back on its feet, her biggest dream. This is why it's so devastating when she tells him that,
I hope you find what you're looking for.
Because he already did. Now, I know I've touched on this somewhat throughout the video, but symbolism is a major element of this film, and I couldn't aptly describe how incredible this film is without mentioning it. The key examples of it in the movie are the settings of the Piston Cup races at the beginning and end of the film, the different paint jobs McQueen sports, and the lighting of the sets. The opening race of the film is meant to serve as a metaphor for McQueen's state of mind in Act 1. It's set in Motor Speedway of the South, a fictional racetrack the team created, modeled after Bristol Motor Speedway. With its large build and high bank turns, it's almost impossible to see anything from the outside world inside it. This, coupled with the race being set at nighttime, symbolizes how close-minded and self-centered Lightning is. After he's undergone character development throughout Acts 2 and 3, the racetrack scene towards the end of the film, Los Angeles International Speedway, is built to accommodate this. This time around, the track is much shallower and wider, making it easier to see what lies beyond. And it's set at daytime. McQueen's paint jobs also represent his growth as a character. In the opening of the film, his paint is shiny and sleek, but as he spends more time in Radiator Springs and becomes acquainted with the town, it begins to become faded and dustier. It's not until he's given his makeover that his paint regains its glossy sheen, this time with a darker hue of red. This signifies how he's embraced the town and its people, having finally discovered what true happiness is. Something interesting to note here is that originally McQueen was meant to retain his spoiler in that scene, but the computer failed to render it. They were going to fix the problem, but Lasseter thought McQueen looked so much like a classic custom car without it that they decided to leave it off. In the film's epilogue, he sports a look that combines his cruising appearance with his Piston Cup livery. This shows that while he still takes great pride in his career and enjoys racing, he's also learned to appreciate the little things life has to offer. As I mentioned before, lighting also plays a key role in Cars.
We start Act 2 with a world that has absolutely no color. He looks around and there's nothing alive, everything is dead. Yet somehow, characters survived in that world and they see beauty in that place. You're really playing with the psychology of lighting and color. As we progress, and we have sunrises and sunset, we start playing with the lighting on the set and start revealing the background hills. We start minimizing the atmosphere over distance. To a point towards the end, the whole town pretty much opens up. And the lighting on the town and on the hills, everything is looking magical.
Cars' soundtrack is so fantastic that it deserves a video of its own, but I still plan to touch on it here. When making the movie, John Lasseter immediately knew that it had to be filled with great driving songs. So he went out and found some of the best musicians there were. Randy Newman, a longtime maestro for the studio, handled the instrumental parts of the score, while Sheryl Crow, the Rascal Flatts, James Taylor, Brad Paisley, and John Mayer all performed the lyrical portions. They even managed to get their hands on a rare swing version of Chuck Berry's Route 66 that the record company didn't even know existed at the time. Each of them brought something special to the table. Sheryl Crow brought the hotshot attitude of McQueen and the down-home country aspect of NASCAR in her song Real Gone. The Rascal Flatts added a sense of adventure and excitement to the open road with their cover of Life is a Highway. James Taylor emphasized the tragedy of the bypass with the somber tone of Our Town. And John Mayer gave the movie a rock and roll flair with his rendition of Route 66. Arguably the most important song out of its score, however, is Brad Paisley's Find Yourself. Having the end credit themes restate the message of their films has been a staple of Pixar animation studios over the years, with Down to Earth, The Time of Your Life, and If I Didn't Have You being notable examples. But in my mind, Find Yourself blows them all out of the water. It manages to emphasize the main idea of the film in such a poetic way that it doesn't feel cheesy or preachy at all. It's a song that speaks to me very deeply because it demonstrates that sometimes when life throws you a curveball, it can lead you to something you weren't expecting, which is why this film is so special to me. Cars is a film that has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I can still recall the fateful day that I spotted it at my local QFC when I was just a boy and asked my mom if I could have it, leading to my lifelong obsession with it and Pixar in general. I have one of the largest collections of Cars diecast there is, spanning across all 3 films and filled with almost any character you could think of. I can even quote every line of dialogue from this movie verbatim. Hey buddy, you're one gutsy racer. Oh hey, Mr. the King. You got more talent in one lug nut than a lot of cars got in their whole body. Really? But you're stupid. Excuse me? Turn right to go left. Hey, guess what? I tried. Hey, you know what? This crazy thing happened. I went right. You keep talking to yourself, people will think you're crazy. Thanks for the tip. What? I wasn't talking to you. Ciao. Hi. Magnum McQueen told me this was the best place in the world to get tires. How about setting me and my friends up with 3 or 4 sets each? Guido, there is a real Michael Schumacher Ferrari in my store. A real Ferrari! Punch me, Guido. Punch me in the face. This is the most glorious day of my life. Wow. Spero che tu mi sei apprenda. Mi dicono che siete fantastici. Pretty impressive, huh? As a kid, I only enjoyed it at a base level. The cars went fast, the colors were bright and flashy, and the main character was my favorite color. But as I got older, I came to truly understand and appreciate its story. In particular, I connected very deeply to McQueen and Doc. Even though I was a pretty good kid who always tried to do the right thing and be nice, like Lightning, I had, and still have, my moments of anger and impulsivity. I often felt like others my age looked down upon me for this, plus other shortcomings I had, and I tried to bury that deep down. When I moved away from home about 2 years ago, the idea that I didn't matter became further solidified. I had very few friends I could see anymore, was forced to quarantine myself in my house for most of the time I spent living there, and contracted an infection that caused my anxiety to skyrocket. My troubles didn't end there though. The few friends that I did make, I ended up being pulled away from due to their circumstances. It just seemed like life was out to make me miserable and take away any form of happiness or dignity that I once possessed. I immediately thought of how Lightning felt when he was betrayed by his friend Carl in his origin book, Struck by Lightning. Our situations were different, since my friends were very kind and never wanted to hurt me, but I understood where he was coming from in his unwillingness to be vulnerable towards others because of his experiences. I also thought of how Doc felt when the racing world cast him aside after his accident. He put so much passion, love, and effort into what he did, only to have it all taken away from him. Him saying,
"There was a lot left in me. I never got a chance to show him."
Never fails to move me, because I know how hard it is to be in a situation where you have so much more to give, but you just can't. His words are even more potent because he just proved how true that was a minute ago. It was hard, but through a lot of soul searching, I too was able to find myself. I realized that had I not gone through that darkness, I wouldn't have been able to help others through their own problems. So whenever I watch Cars, I'm always reminded of how much it inspired me, and how far I've come. There are so many great scenes in this movie that happen back to back, like Mater accepting McQueen as his friend, followed by Sally teaching him how to have integrity, or Doc's beautiful run around Willie's Butte coupled with his confession to Lightning. It's incredible how Pixar was able to mesh these scenes together without making the narrative feel cluttered. In fact, many of these moments serve as foreshadowing for later events in the movie. For example, one minor but crucial detail is that during the opening of the film, McQueen is driving on racing tires, which have no treads, but during his interview with Corey Turbowitz, his pit crew changed them out for treaded tires, which give him the ability to effectively travel the roads of the interstate and Radiator Springs when he gets lost. Throughout most of Act 1 and Act 2, McQueen struggles with drifting on dirt. This is shown in various places throughout the story, but it's made completely obvious during his race with Doc around Willie's Butte. It's not until he observes Doc power slide successfully that he's able to replicate the trick himself. Remember how I mentioned those figures in the automotive world that helped in the making of the movie? Well, many of them were cast in walk-on parts, or as Laster liked to call them, drive-on parts in the film. Michael Wallace, Darrell Waltrip, Artie Kepner, Humpy Wheeler, and Richard Petty all made appearances, as did Jay Leno and Tom and Ray Magliacci, the famed Car Talk brothers. Even Jeremy Clarkson made a cameo as Harv, McQueen's agent, but only in the UK. In the US, Harv's played by Jeremy Piven.
Come on, mate, get in the trailer. Come on, kid, get in the trailer.
The insight these people gave to the filmmakers proved very helpful, not only from the standpoint of being accurate in all things automotive, but from a storytelling standpoint as well. For example, Doc saying "hot snot" was not originally in the script. It was an ad-lib by Paul Newman in a phone call to Lasseter. Another example is the scene where McQueen pushes the king across the finish line in the film's climax. Richard Petty pointed out to Lasseter that according to NASCAR's rules, it is illegal to push another car on the last lap of a race. Although John didn't want to compromise on the film's accuracy, he knew what an important moment this was for McQueen's character arc. To get around this, he created a loophole by having Daryl Cartrip say,
"Hey man, he's not really pushing him. He's just giving him a little bump draft."
But that's not all. The scene where Sally confronts McQueen about keeping his promise to Mater also wasn't originally in the script. It was written by Bonnie Hunt and her co-writer Don Lake in order to give Sally more agency in the story, since Pixar didn't just want her to be a wishy-washy lover of their protagonist. When it came time to release Cars on DVD, to format the film so that it would fit on a standard television, rather than crop parts of the images out, Pixar went back and added even more picture.
We developed in-house a whole suite of tools and a whole system for getting the film onto video in a way that we're all happy with. We don't feel we've made any compromises.
Just look at how much more there is to see in the full screen version than the widescreen version. They didn't have to go to all these lengths to enrich the movie, but they did! And that is deserving of praise. Many critics of Cars claim that it's a ripoff of Doc Hollywood, a 1991 rom-com starring Michael J. Fox. Admittedly, there are similarities between the two films. Both star a young, cocky main protagonist that end up in a small town after incurring property damage, but soon fall in love with both the town and its residents. While I personally don't believe that it was Pixar's intention to copy that story, in my mind, a movie doesn't have to be wholly original to be good. After all, it's not like the idea of a stubborn, rebellious protagonist that goes through trials and tribulations to become a better person is a groundbreaking new idea. Many films and TV shows have adapted that concept over the years. What separates Cars from those other stories is the fact that it's able to put a unique spin on the idea by setting it in a world filled with anthropomorphic cars, to emphasize the idea that the journey in life is the reward. On the topic of Cars setting, that too has often been a spot of contention for Pixar fans. Some people go to great lengths to try and get to the bottom of how the cars in that universe are alive, and complain about how their world doesn't make sense when they don't get the answers they're looking for. But if I may ask, does it really matter? With each of Pixar's films, you must suspend your disbelief in order to enjoy them. If you pick them apart and constantly guess their logic, then you rob yourself of the magic. One could just as easily ask the question, well, how can the toys in Toy Story talk without lungs? Or how can the robots in WALL-E have souls? Or how did the Incredibles even get their powers to begin with? People can relate to and enjoy these films without once ever questioning these things. So how is Cars any different? If toys can talk, robots can have feelings, and monsters can be workaday Joes, then the idea of a world built by cars, for cars, is not such a far-fetched one. If anything, it fits right in with Pixar's MO, taking ideas that sound silly on paper and infusing them with human emotions and ideas. They're not meant to be realistic, but they still manage to be believable. The biggest argument made against Cars is that it was solely made for merchandise, but that is blatantly untrue. Lasseter and co. were dedicated to making a well-written, thought-provoking, accurate film without cutting any corners or talking down to their audience. In many ways, Cars truly was the passion project of the studio. Pixar's core members were both genius storytellers and major car enthusiasts. They wanted to give 110% when it came to producing it because it was something they were so passionate about. If the film had been produced by a different studio like DreamWorks or Illumination, I highly doubt it would have been as good, because neither of those studios possessed the attention to detail nor the dedication to getting the most out of their movies like Pixar did back in the day. And to my knowledge, none of the people who work at those companies are car buffs, so they definitely wouldn't have been as passionate about working on it. Disney, however, couldn't seem to understand that and saw Cars only as a cash cow, milking it for every last dollar it could produce through excessive merchandising and low-effort spin-offs. Pixar never intended for it to be used as such, but sadly, thanks to Disney's meddling, that's what it's become viewed as. While I personally believe that Cars should have remained a solo film, as its sequels failed to understand what made their predecessors so great, one positive thing I can say about them is that they certainly were not lazy cash grabs. Cars is a criminally underrated film that deserves far more praise than it often receives. It's a film that I've loved ever since I was young and have only grown more attached to as I've gotten older. It's a movie filled with passion, heart, love, and humor, all hallmarks of Pixar's best works. This was a film that could only have been made by actors and directors who truly cared about the world of the automobile, and it shows. But I think what makes this film so great is the fact that it speaks volumes about something so fundamentally human, despite being a movie about talking cars.
We all discovered something we weren't expecting, you know? It's just like life. You start down the path not knowing where it's going to lead you, but you enjoy the ride.